Hey, everybody. It is Natalie. Thank you so much for being here. I am just going to attend to the technology for one moment and we will kick it off. I'm very excited to bring you this interesting reading. Hey, everybody. It is excellent. Okay, I am here and I am live with you. And I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. And thank you for those of you who are joining or will join. Again, today's reading is called The Destruction of Justin Timberlake's Reputation and the Astrology Behind All of It. And I've spent some significant time looking at his solar return for 2023, his transits for the moment that Britney Spears published that book. I've looked at his annual perfections and his zodiacal releasing. I've looked at a number and where these eclipses are falling for him as well, because Britney Spears, as we know, just published a major memoir called The Woman in Me, which basically contradicts all of Justin Timberlake's narrative that he put forward when he first broke out as a solo artist. And I'll be giving a little bit more detail for those of you that are like, I have no idea what this is. I don't know who he is, what's going on. We will get more into it. But I am very excited to bring you this today. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And for those of you that are wondering, like if I've ever done a natal chart reading on this channel for Britney Spears, I definitely have. And I do have a playlist on this channel called I Read Celebrity Charts here. So you can find the reading that I did. I did a very detailed reading of her natal chart. Tonight, I'm not going to focus as much on her natal chart as I'm going to focus on Justin Timberlake and the transits that he is having right now. Hi, Holly. Hello, my dear. And if you jump into the chat and you want to say hi and leave comments, you're more than welcome to. And so just to back up a little bit before we jump into the charts, what's been going on, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it, but Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears, they used to date back in the day. Justin Timberlake was one of the lead singers for NSYNC, a boy band from the 90s. And of course, everybody knows who Britney Spears is, the pop princess herself. And these two dated in the early 2000s. And Justin Timberlake left NSYNC. I think he left, I want to say, I think it was 2001-ish that he left NSYNC to pursue his his solo career. And so he had albums out with NSYNC that were very popular at the time. Britney was at one of the height of her popularity, at the time too. And they were like this really, big name couple at that time back in the early 2000s. Well, these two eventually broke up in 2002, in March of 2002. And Justin Timberlake went ahead and did his first solo album after they broke up, called Justified. For those of you that remember, the solo album that he dropped in 2002 and eventually ended up winning a Grammy for this album and kind of kicked him off as a solo artist at the time. Now, this is the single that really put Justin Timberlake on the map as a solo artist. And this is the cover from the single. And the song that he wrote about his relationship with Britney Spears back in the early 2000s was called Cry Me a River. And the lyrics of it were like, you cheated, girl. Now it's your turn to cry. So cry me a river. Basically insinuating that she was a cheater and, that she'd broken his heart and now it's her turn to cry. So cry me a river. And that song was actually the first song that he ever had that actually won a Grammy. And so that particular song really made him take off as a career. Now, so when we go look at, want to show you guys some stuff here. Hold on a second. I got to move this around a little bit. So here's NSYNC, the boy band group that he was, a part of back in the day. I showed you him and Britney. There's Cry Me a River, okay, that he wrote. There's Britney and Justin from the early 2000s when they were dating. And here's a little bit of information about Cry Me a River. So Cry Me a River is a song by American singer-songwriter Justin Timberlake for his debut solo album, Justified. It was written by Justin Timberlake with Timbaland and, these other people. It was inspired by Justin's former relationship with singer Britney Spears. Okay. And in the video, Cry Me a River, he hires a Britney Spears lookalike to play his love interest and play like this cheating love interest. Now, back in the day, Britney Spears said that the video was a publicity stunt for his album and to get him recognition as a solo artist. But Justin Timberlake maintained that she did not inspire the production. However, in 2011, Timberlake admitted his breakup with Britney Spears inspired the video. The clip won awards for Best Male Video, Best Pop Video, and actually won him a Grammy and put him on the map as a solo artist. So basically kind of like piggybacking off of, his feelings of being scorned and being cheated on. Well, fast forward 20 plus years, and now Britney Spears has released her memoir, The Woman in Me, where she talks about how Justin Timberlake cheated on her multiple times. She does admit to kissing one of her backup dancers, but she alleges that he cheated on her multiple times, that he forced her to have an abortion. There's all this kind of stuff, that when he broke up with her, he texted her 2 words, "It's over." And that was kind of it. While he was off playing in Hollywood, she was lying comatose in her hometown, far, far away, like in total shock, unable to speak, everything. And so the hard part of that breakup for Britney is, and that song Cry Me a River, is that everyone vilified her for that back in the day. And it kind of led to a downward spiral for her that really affected the rest of her life. And the press was really brutal to Britney back in the day, accusing her of being like the cheating harlot, and she broke America's golden boy's heart. And then we come to find out after all these years that this isn't actually true. And what also is fascinating is Justin Timberlake wrote a song called What Goes Around Comes Around. And so he has this whole thing, Cry Me a River, what goes around comes around. And not only that, like several times in the press after they broke up, he spoke about her in a very disparaging way, talking about taking her virginity or stealing her virginity, talking about accepting an award one time and calling her like a Madonna wannabe. And, he said some nice things about her later in life in the press, and he did issue an apology to her in 2021. When that movie, The Framing of Britney Spears, came out. So, he has, apologized here and there 20 years later. But even after he made this song and kind of piggybacked off of her fame and denigrated her in order to get ahead, he still, years after that, was dissing her in the press. So we are going to go ahead and take a look at what goes around comes around at this point for Justin Timberlake, because since this memoir came out in October, just very recently, this memoir came out like less than a week ago, October 23rd. Ever since this memoir come out, he has been getting hammered in the press, and his reputation has really gone downhill to the point where people are, I guess he left the country with his wife, and I guess he turned off all his Instagram comments and, all this kind of stuff. He's not really saying anything about it. But at the same time, like, this is a lot of things to come out that people didn't really know about. And you can see that Cry Me a River album cover there, where he's like, feel sorry for me. I'm the victim. Like, I'm the poor guy that got my heart broke, this type of thing. And, if you're sad because you cheated on me, well, then cry me a river, so that's really what was going on with that. Now, when we get into Justin Timberlake's chart himself, okay, so this is his natal chart, and I'm not going to do a full dive into his natal chart because that could probably take me a couple of hours, and then I'd have to, and then I've had to add on a bunch of predictions and other techniques after that to show what's going on. So I'm going to kind of give you guys the quick footnotes on his chart, and then I'm going to jump right into the transits and what's going on, okay, to make all of this happen right now. So he's a Leo rising with the North Node, or Rahu, in the first house. And, America's golden boy, famous, confident, overconfident, maybe, especially with Rahu rising, a tendency to be, very out for himself, maybe at times, and very selfish about what he wants and what he's trying to do. Also, Rahu rising can indicate fame, particularly in a showboat of a sign like Leo. Okay, so we have him here as a Leo rising. Now, the other thing that I would like to know, and he's quite the entertainer too, or at least he was back in the day. He is very talented musically, and he has Neptune in the fifth house, which I see a lot with artists and musicians and people who are very creative. And so we can see that he has a trine right here between his ascendant and Neptune, and also the moon. So he has a moon-Neptune conjunction in the fifth house. And the fifth house is where we can find, entertainers, artists, etc. And so we see that right away, his ascendant is trine the moon. He's very popular. People love him. And I also feel like with this moon-Neptune conjunction, hi, Court. Hi there. Thank you for your comment. I really appreciate it. What's interesting about the moon-Neptune conjunction and like Cry Me a River, isn't that just like moon-Neptune is like very emotional, very like, it's very, if you were going to tell someone to cry me a river, you would go and, throw moon-Neptune on top of them. So I find it really interesting that like his breakout song as an entertainer is, Cry Me a River. And, moon-Neptune can be, here's a couple things about moon-Neptune. Now, moon-Neptune can be very compassionate, very giving, very like, almost like wide-eyed and gullible a little bit. And here's one thing I want to say. Now, for those of us that are older, I'm not giving him a get out of jail free card at all. Okay. Just want to say that. But for those of us that are older, that are, 40 plus, and we know a lot of the crap that we did in our 20s and the way we treated people in our early 20s wasn't exactly right. And, if our past came out from 20 years ago, it'd probably really suck too, But at the same time, I also think that even after Cry Me a River came out, he continued to kind of throw darts at her in the press, like here and there. And, the moon-Neptune could also be kind of like, I'm like the innocent martyr, and this person is the bad person. And I do think with the moon-Neptune in the fifth house, because the moon has to do with the public and the public's perception of who we are. And the fifth house is also, it's a very dynamic house. It's a very creative house, but it's also a very like mojo, showboaty type of a house. And it is a trine house. It has a trine relationship to the ascendant. So it shows this ability for him to kind of play on the emotions of the populace and garner sympathy from his music and from his work and his creativity and his talents, and garner sympathy in a way that really, because his moon and Neptune are both in Sagittarius, in a way that really helps him take off and move up. Now, I think it's interesting too, because like I said, I think there's a gullibility factor there where he could have, and he was being managed by, big time record executive people, and they could have maybe convinced him. I'm just putting this out here as a side note that, stretching the truth a little bit or making that Crimea River a little more dramatic or something like that was going to be okay. Like everything's going to be okay at the end of the day. And with the moon, Neptune, and Sagittarius in the fifth house, I feel like there's this kind of like naive belief that, I'm not hurting anyone's feelings and all I want is the best for everyone and everything's going to turn out okay at the end of the day. Oh, thank you, Court. Oh, thank you, my friend. That's so nice of you. I really appreciate that. So, I mean, I do think Moon Neptune can be very compassionate and very, caring. And I'm not trying to put down the Moon Neptune folks out there, but I also think you have to look at his chart as a whole because he is a Leo rising. So he's going to be more like geared towards maybe himself being in the spotlight and himself getting what he needs. And he's going to be maybe, especially a young male Leo who has that much success growing up very early on, is going to feel like, my intentions are good. Everything's going to be fine. It'll all work out. And that's a very naive, Sagittarian, because Sagittarius is an awesome sign, but it also can be a little naive, I think, at sometimes about like it wants to believe in all the possibilities, but all the possibilities aren't always there, So I think that to me tells me that he's maybe a slightly, especially as a young person, that perhaps he was gullible, naive, or easily pushed into doing something because he thought it would, it would be okay at the end of the day, like not really thinking things through. So I do feel like he could have a tendency to be bamboozled like that. Now, does that get him off the hook scot-free? No. And it's just something that I'm seeing in his chart. I don't know. I mean, he could have, I also see other things in his chart too, which I'll talk about in a minute, which aren't, which are a little on the nastier side. And so, there's this like, I'm a good guy and, I'm not meaning to hurt anyone's feelings, Moon Neptune conjunction in Sagittarius tried my ascendant. But at the same time, do you guys also see the Venus Pluto square right there too? So let me go ahead and show you guys what I mean there. So Venus, of course, rules the 10th house of his career. And Venus is located here in the 6th house. And Venus is in a square to Pluto. It's a pretty tight square too. It's 1 degree off. And, Venus square Pluto, particularly in the hands of a young guy who, has a big ego or thinks that he's God's gift to women, Leo rising, Rahu in the 1st house, could be somebody who, is, hey, I cheated with all these women, but I should be able to do what I want to do. But if you did one little thing, you're the worst harlot that ever lived. And so, Venus, of course, represents women in general and our relationships, and especially in the chart of a man who likes women, the women I'm in relationships with square Pluto, talking about, betrayal, cheating, lying. And so it doesn't surprise me that his way to the top in his career had to do with, really pressing that narrative, Pluto in the 3rd house, of, cheating and betrayal. And so you can see the connection there already to his 10th house of career. But the other side of that is you could also see where relationships could come back to bite him and destroy his reputation and career, because our reputation is the 10th house. And how the public views us in our best state and in our reputation. So that 10th house is ruled by Venus square Pluto. And I called this video the destruction of his reputation, because what goes around comes around, and something is definitely coming around for Justin Timberlake. And a big part of it is that Venus-Pluto square. Now, interestingly, Britney Spears also has a Venus-Pluto square in her chart, but it's situated a little bit differently. And we'll look a little bit at her chart compared to his, but I'm not going to go too crazy with that. But he has this Venus-Pluto square where Venus is ruling his 10th house. So woman as a harlot who destroys my career, or woman who I use to get to the top, that all of woman that I destroy to get to the top, woman that I'm jealous of, Venus square Pluto, the 10th house representing my career. In some of the interviews that he has with Britney Spears from back in the day that I watched, he appears when interviewers are like, "Oh, are you so happy to be with Britney? Like, she's so talented and amazing." And he's like, "She sure is," and it seems like he is proud of her, but at the same time, just the way he was kind of talking about it, I kind of wondered if he was in any way jealous of her or jealous of his success, because at that time she was really the pop princess and he hadn't even put out his solo album yet. And so he was just, some guy from NSYNC, and NSYNC really wasn't that popular until they came over to the US. They were kind of in Europe before, but the Backstreet Boys were kind of always overshadowing them. And so, him using her to get on top in his career, like you can also see where that's coming out in his chart a little bit. And, him years later continuing to kind of take digs at her and being like, "Yeah, I also dated a Britney or a Madonna wannabe," at some random award event in a speech like years later, is also kind of like not letting go of it and also kind of driving the knife in a little bit more. And Court says Justin's chart gives me narcissist mommy issue vibes. Oh my gosh. Tell it like it is, guys. Don't hold back, Holly, I love it. I love it, Court. Holly says they were young and started back out in the Mickey Mouse Club, easily managed. Yeah, Holly. Yeah, I think both of them were kind of, young and naive and easily mismanaged and all of that. But it's interesting, just at the time that all of that was going on, when they were in their early 20s, Hollywood was even more misogynistic than it is now. And they were really, if he didn't, I don't know, maybe he didn't fully understand. He always seems kind of dumb to me in a way and kind of a little out to lunch. It could be the moon Neptune. I don't know. It could also be the Mercury in Pisces. Not to diss on Mercury in Pisces, but Mercury is in detriment in Pisces. It's not, so there could be this thing where communication's not clear, or what he says gets him into trouble, later on. But yeah, also too, with his 10th house and squaring Pluto could also indicate, him being controlled or him being kind of strong-armed in his career by managers and things like that too. So we have to, I don't know, right? And that's the hard thing, is we can never know, what he knew at age 20 and, what he knows now. And if he is truly sorry or what, or if he's just a total narc who doesn't really, we don't know that, but it's, there's things going on here that don't look good about his character. And that's a problem. And, the other thing I will say about his chart too is, so his ascendant is in Leo. So it's really important that we take a look at where the sun is in his chart. And he has sun in the 7th house right there. Okay. He also has Mars and Ketu in the 7th house as well. And, the Mars in the 7th house could talk about, fighting in his partnerships and his, marriage and his relationships, a lot of fighting or a lot of arguing about the way that each other sees things. And so we've got that going on there. And also Mars, because this is a day chart, because the sun is above the horizon here, Mars is going to be the most malefic planet in the chart. And so, that Mars is a bit of a problem because his ascendant is also directly opposite that Mars. And and it's landing in the seventh house of partnerships. So it could say, he's vindictive towards partners, partners are vindictive towards him. We can certainly support that with the Venus square Pluto as well. I also think that Mars is very telling because he sent her a very cutthroat, terse breakup text in 2002 when, when texts were not really that popular. He sent her a very terse, it's over. And then that's it. Even though they'd been living together, she'd had an abortion. They went through all this stuff together. And so that kind of cutthroat kind of it's over breakup text really is kind of, Mars opposite the ascendant in the seventh house. But the other thing is that after that, he brought her, after he sent her that text message, eventually he went to see her and brought her a framed letter, which was essentially a breakup letter, and put it in a frame for her to keep. What a moron. Like, why would, like, my letter is so important. I need my breakup letter. Like, let me put it in. I don't mean to be mean, but I'm like, man, if somebody did that to me, I would have had him hanging by the flagpole. But anyway, he brought, and that's a very Leo thing to do. Like, this is my breakup letter and it's so important. I should frame it and give it to you, So I was like, ugh, when I heard that. But anyway, NSYNC was created and managed by Louis Pearlman after success with the creation of Backstreet Boys' Pearlman embezzled scandal. Yeah. Justin Timberlake's first manager did embezzle money from him, and there was scandal involved in that. And we can see, his 10th house square Pluto. So, there is that strong arming energy or running into, bad authority figures. He also has Sun Ketu, which made me wonder if he had issues with his father. Actually, his father was a Baptist. He ran like the Baptist choir. I didn't really find anything too bad about him online. I just briefly looked, but I wondered perhaps if he had some issues with his father because we see the Sun Ketu there. That sun is also, so a little bit about the Sun Ketu. And here's a really interesting thing too, you guys. So that song, Cry Me a River, the very first lyric of that song is, you were my sun, you were my earth. Okay. And of course, he's a Leo rising, and his sun is in the 7th house of partnerships. Okay. So, a lot of times I've told you guys, when you have sun in the 7th house, you can have a partner who's like overly dependent on their partner, or gets a sense of their identity from their partner, or needs to have a partner in order to kind of reach their goals in life. That could be one interpretation of sun in the 7th house, especially when it rules the 1st house, right? Of me, like, this is me and my partner in my house of partner. Having a partner is really important for me to reach my goals in life. And so we kind of see that energy there. And, it's interesting to me that his current wife is somebody, Jessica Biel. Now she's starred in some shows or movies or things like that, but she doesn't have the insane popularity that Britney Spears had. He picked somebody that was famous, but a little bit more under the radar. And, Ketu is a little bit more under the radar. But what's interesting to me, and Ketu also obscures things. So it's like, what are you looking for in a partnership? Are you looking for someone who's exactly like you? You're in your own 7th house. Are you looking for a partner who's famous? Are you looking for somebody who gets a lot of attention? Are you looking for somebody that'll fight back against you? Like, what is it that you're looking for? And Ketu can definitely, also Ketu, we have to remember Rahu and Ketu are the planets that cause eclipses. And so the other energy, and of course, they have to do with our fate and our current lifetime and our past lifetimes. And, Sun Ketu in the seventh house is like, I'm in my partner's seventh house. So I need my partner. I need my partner's help. And that also happened in a past life too, or that also happened then, or I'm meeting partners who are very important to my life mission, who resonated with me in a past life too. So there's these kind of things that can come up. But also when you're a Sun Ketu person and you're a Leo rising, that can chip away at the self-confidence. Now, he's got this ascendant in Leo, and so it's like bravado, confident, overconfident. But look, his sun is also in a square to Chiron in the 10th house, very tight square. And Sun Chiron can sometimes have to do with public humiliation. I remembered, for instance, Billy Ray Cyrus, who's saying, "Don't break my heart, my achy breaky heart." A lot of people made fun of him in the press from way back in the day. I'm just thinking of other people that have Sun Chiron. But Sun Chiron can definitely be, especially if you're a big star, can definitely be public humiliation. And we see here where a partner possibly has the ability to publicly humiliate him as well. Now, what's interesting in Britney Spears's memoir is she also talks about, the size of his package. I'm not going to get too much of it on here, but it's a pretty small package. I don't know how else to say it, guys, but she's like, it's not, she's like, is it, what's going on or whatever? Is it there? So I don't mean to laugh or be weird about that. I'm just, glossing over that point highly, but high level point there. But you could also see here where a partner could possibly have the ability to humiliate him. Sun square Chiron in the 10th house of his career, and then partner here. So that's interesting to me too. And another thing that Britney wrote in her memoir is that Justin Timberlake would oftentimes, like in his early 20s, when he would be meeting other recording artists who were African American, would talk in like a fake Black accent. And, she just thought that the reason that he did that is because he was always trying to be liked by other people, or that he was always afraid maybe that people wouldn't like him, or, and I could definitely see that with his son being in the 7th house, being very, especially when he's younger, being very focused on how other people perceive him and wanting to like get along with everybody, or wanting to wanting to have everyone like him. I can see that. And I can see why he may have insecurities as well with that Sun square Chiron, having some innate insecurities about things. And it seems like he does try to do stuff like that, kind of pull stunts like that to get people to like him, but then it backfires on him, right? Mars opposite his ascendant, then it backfires on him. And then Holly says this situation is so reminiscent of, Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan. Oh my gosh. I wanted to do those two really, really as well, do their charts as well. And I do think there's data online for their birth dates. Very fascinating energy. But anyway, so those are kind of some of the features of his chart. And I do have one more thing about his personal chart that I need to bring up, which is his packed 3rd house. Okay. So the ruler of his ascendant, or the ruler of his 7th house, is Saturn. And so Saturn is in this 3rd house in Libra in a conjunction with Jupiter. So, my partner is very blessed type of energy, or my partner has a lot or is very blessed. My partner's in a conjunction with Jupiter and with my part of fortune, or my partner has success or money or is very blessed. I really want us to focus on this 3rd house, and I'm going to tell you guys why. Okay, I want everybody to look at Pluto at 24 degrees Libra. Keep that in your head, in the 3rd house, okay? And I want you to think about Aries and Libra and Pluto at 24 degrees Libra. And think about what has been going on recently, very recently, with, it starts with an E and it ends with an E, eclipse. Okay. I'm being a little bit silly right now. But anyway, what's been going on with this Pluto at 24 degrees Libra is that very recently, while this memoir was coming out, right in the middle of it, we had an eclipse that happened. What was it? The book came out on October 23rd, and the eclipse in Libra at 21 degrees Libra happened on October 14th. So, that book came out this October in the middle between two eclipses, with that first eclipse being directly on Justin Timberlake's Pluto. Okay. And because that eclipse was on his Pluto, we also know that the Venus would have been activated as well, because that Venus is square the Pluto in his natal chart. And so we have eclipses in October that were hitting Justin Timberlake's third house and ninth house. This is where the eclipses were hitting for him, the third house to the ninth house. And I just want us to really pay attention to that 24 degrees Pluto, because it's going to come up multiple times. And before I move on, I want to talk to you guys about what the third house represents, some key buzzwords in astrology for the third house. Okay. So the third house can represent rumors, critics, debating, gossip, gossipers, books, publishing, novels, public opinion as it relates to personal advertising and personal advertising in general. Okay. And the third house can also represent letters, reports, messengers, communications, self-expression, debates. It could also have to do with communication problems if they're coming up, press releases, public opinion, and freedom of speech. Okay. So keep in mind, like, this book came out in the middle of this eclipse and was hitting his natal Pluto, squaring that Venus. Okay. So this is already a heavy hitting eclipse for him. And because it is hitting the third house of books, rumors, gossip, communication, that energy is very highlighted for him. Also love, Venus squaring Venus, love. And also when we have the nodes, the south node and the north node visiting a natal planet like Pluto during an eclipse, we can talk about a purging of an old love story that's kind of coming out in the news media again. And I'm going to go ahead now and show you guys the transit chart for this book coming out. Okay. So I have Justin Timberlake's chart on the inside, and I have Britney's book release here on the outside. Okay. And so couple things on this is a chart for the very day that book came out. Now, let's keep in mind that was literally a few days after the eclipse that was hitting his third house of communication, books, news, media. And you can see the south node. The south node is right there, directly on top of his natal Pluto at 24 degrees. It is literally on top of it to the degree, my babies. Okay. It's literally there. And so when I talked about, and this south node, of course, is also squaring his natal Venus. This transiting south node. So when I'm talking about a purging and a releasing of an old love story coming up out of the ground from nowhere to be revealed again, like, here we are in this energy. Now, the other thing that's probably really grabbing your attention is the fact that transiting Pluto is also on top of his natal Venus, right? So we've got Pluto south node South Node squared his Venus, and then we also have transiting Pluto on his natal Venus. Now, Pluto is a very slow-moving planet, so it has been going over that natal Venus, going back and retrograding over it. This is literally like the last time that Pluto in Capricorn will be on his Venus, though. This is the last time in over like 20 some years. It will move into Aquarius for good next year. So, you know, this is kind of the last hit of Venus Pluto that he's getting in his natal chart. And this eclipse is literally pinging off his Venus Pluto square in his natal chart. And so we can see that is already going on big time. The other thing that I found fascinating too about this book date release chart is look at Justin Timberlake's natal Mercury in Pisces, okay? So there's, you know, Mercury, of course, having to do with writers, books, communications, you know, Mercury in Pisces, hard to deal with sometimes, not always the easiest, but we have his natal Mercury in Pisces. And then look what we have here. We've got Saturn at 0 degrees Pisces, which has been retrograding exactly to the degree. Now, his Mercury in Pisces is at 0 degrees Pisces, and that Saturn is retrograding at 0 degrees Pisces to the degree within about 15 minutes of each other, on top, bearing down on his Mercury. Now, Justin Timberlake has been completely silent about all of this. He turned off his Twitter comments. He's not really saying anything about it. He's being very quiet and shut down about it. And he's probably feeling very trapped, like there's nothing that he can say. And, you know, the other thing is this Saturn in Pisces has been moving from zero since March of 2023, has been going back and forth between 0 degrees Pisces and 7 degrees Pisces since March of this year. And Justin Timberlake knew that this memoir was coming out. And I think his PR team was trying to get ahead of it and do something about it. I don't think they knew exactly what was in that book, but I imagine that for this entire year since he found out about that he's been worried about that, because that Saturn has been back and forth over his Mercury. And it's stationed, you know, it didn't station, it's about ready to come out of retrograde, but it is literally right there on his Mercury. And so I find that very interesting as well, because he has very much like clamped down, you know, and Saturn is definitely the planet that kind of shuts you down, like be quiet, you know, Mercury, Saturn. And so he's not saying anything. He's not talking about anything. He's keeping everything very closed down. So I find that fascinating as well. Yeah, I wrote down a couple things about the Mercury Saturn. He can't say much. He may be in a repeating loop of negative thoughts. She's speaking out, but he's shut down. Okay. Like for the first time, he's kind of shut down. And, you know, sometimes with Mercury and Pisces, especially, you know, and I'm not trying to diss on Mercury and Pisces, because I got, you know, one of my best friends has Mercury and Pisces, and lots of wonderful people have Mercury and Pisces, but it's how you handle it. And if you kind of are already a person that believes that everything that you do is going to be okay, you know, Mercury, Neptune, and Sagittarius, then maybe you do embellish things sometimes, or you're not always saying the truth. That Mercury is in the 8th house in Pisces. And, you know, the accountability factor of Saturn is like, okay, you need to tell the truth. And Saturn really, you know, Mercury and Pisces can be very fuzzy on the details. So that's Saturn really bearing down on his Mercury, going, you know, get real about what you're saying. And if it's not reality, then, you know, then shut it, like that type of thing. Mercury and Saturn it's not his turn to speak. He's having to accept the losses quietly. And even friends that try to defend him are being massively dragged. And we see that for him, Mercury in his chart rules the 11th house of friendships. And Lance Bass came out and tried to said, hey, just, it's been a long time. Britney forgave him. Like, just try to forgive him to the public. He was kind of saying that. And then people were like jumping down his throat. So even going, what are you talking about? This is, messed up or whatever. And so even friends that are trying to defend him are not really going to get anywhere with that, and they're probably going to take a big kick as well if they try to do that. So we've got a lot of stuff going on there already. And this is for the actual day that the book dropped. Mercury Saturn could be like the very depressing rumors that are going around about his very small package. There's just a lot of things going on here. Okay. And, the other thing about Justin Timberlake is that because of his age, he's having an age-related transit that everybody, in their 40s goes through, but he's having a Neptune Neptune transit right now. Neptune is also squaring his moon. Justin Timberlake in general, and he's been having this Neptune square for a while. I don't know if you guys saw the video where he's like, DC, beat your feet. And then he's like dancing on stage. Do you guys remember this from TikTok, or people are just putting up stories about it? And he was like dancing pretty badly in khakis. And people are like, what's going on with Justin Timberlake? Like, when did he become so uncool? He's been having this Mercury or this, Neptune square for a while too, which is like, it's not great for like, it makes you a little bit soft around the edges, and it's not great for like, male virility. I'm going to get on this stage and, command this dance or whatever. He kind of ended up looking like, an aging, like, dad from like the suburbs kind of a thing, and people are kind of like, what's going on with him? And I mean, he's like, I'm 42. And he actually tried to ask for people's forgiveness and say, I'm sorry or whatever. But it's just kind of a thing going on with him right now. He's also in the middle of a Pluto square and a Neptune square because of where he's at age-wise. So a lot of things are being drug up, and that does happen. These are transits that happens to anyone in their 40s. So it might be a little bit depressing or a little bit sad for him right now with some of the things going on for sure. So we see that happening. Now, the other thing that I wanted to, so we've got the date that everything dropped. And I talked to you guys about how the eclipse was hitting this Pluto at the time that dropped. Now, another thing I just want to bring up to you guys as well, and I'm going to bring it up, I think it might be a good time to bring it up now. So for the eclipses that were happening in October, especially the October 14th eclipse, that eclipse, we haven't had that same eclipse since 2004. So we had an eclipse at 21 degrees of Libra back in 2004. And because of the way that eclipses fall, like every 17 to 18 years, they repeat in the same way. Like we haven't had that since 2004. So this eclipse that happened in October was literally a repeat from 2004. So a lot of astrologers were saying, oh, if you want to know what's going to happen on this eclipse, kind of go back to 2004 and think about what was happening in 2004. So in 2004, Justin Timberlake would have been having this same eclipse in his third house. But what happened to him in 2004 is that he was winning a Grammy for the song Cry Me a River in 2004. And he was winning a Grammy for Cry Me a River. And that was also the same year that he did that Super Bowl performance with, Janet Jackson, and he ripped her shirt and exposed her in the middle of that performance. And so, it's kind of like, there's all of this is coming out again, and it's not just, what he did to Britney Spears. It's also like what he did to Janet Jackson. So, there's a couple of different things going on here that are resonating. So I just found that interesting as well, because it's like, okay, now, 18 years later, like it comes out that like, Crimea River is a lie, pretty much. So it's fascinating. Holly says, especially after they just saw what happened with the backlash with Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher. Yeah. I mean, you'd think people would kind of, deal with things a little bit better, but no. Now, I want to also, but at the same time, I do try to have a tiny bit of compassion, because if people were trying to point out, what I was doing in my 20s, I would not look like a good person either. So, but the thing is like, has he changed? Is he truly sorry? I mean, I did some good things in my 20s, but, my relationships were not great in my 20s. So, but we live and learn, and we're not always great to people, and we don't always do the right thing. But, we hopefully we learn and become better as we get older. But anyway, so let's go ahead. I also was curious, because I was like, let me take a look at Justin Timberlake's solar return chart for 2023. So the last chart we were just looking at was the actual transits on the date that the book was released. Now we're looking at Justin Timberlake when he, in 2023, when the sun returned to the same spot. It was natally on the day that he was born, January 31st. We're looking at his solar return chart, which predicts 2023 or the next year. Now, I just had an inkling to pull his solar return chart. And when I tell you guys that I literally rolled off my chair, I was like, oh my God, when I looked at this solar return chart, because the first thing you do is you look at the ascendant and you go, okay, for this coming year in my solar return chart, where is that ascendant hitting my natal chart? Okay, so the ascendant for the solar return chart, you guys will never believe this crap. It is at 24 degrees Libra. So his solar return ascendant is sitting on top of that Pluto, which was implicated in the eclipses, is sitting directly on top of that Pluto at the exact same degree for his solar return. And because of that, his solar return ascendant is also squaring his natal Venus, which again rules his 10th house of career. So again, we see another indication of why that Pluto at 24 degrees Libra, where those eclipse hit and exactly where his solar return was for 2023, they're hitting at the exact same spot. So that is like a very powerful energy right there. And, brings up this very old story with his relationships. And even without knowing, anything about him, I would definitely predict that there could be a big change in his career, or there could be something that happens with due to his relationship, something with his career is really set off. And it might be a very challenging time for him, So I probably would have already predicted that looking at this, because now you're seeing like a doubling up of energy. Yeah, Holly, my mind was completely blown. I was like, what is going on? And then the other thing that I found fascinating is, look at where Saturn is in his solar return chart. Saturn is at 25 degrees Aquarius, right on top of his Mars. Okay, his Mars is in his 7th house of partnership. Now, I mentioned before, because this is a day chart, Mars is the most malefic planet. And then we have Saturn bearing down on that Mars at the same time. So something very frustrating and very challenging coming out as it relates to himself and who he is, and also public opinion, because the 7th house is also, others and other people in our life, you know, this is really challenging. This is a really challenging year for him. Tough, you know, frustrating and tough, and particularly in the areas of relationships and self-esteem is what I would say. And because Mars also rules his fourth house, could be, you know, fourth house does have to do with our happiness, where we live, our home base. He may be making some changes there, moving or something, but you know, it's just, that's a lot. That's a lot too, with Saturn bearing down on his Mars. Now, the interesting thing, remember how I told you guys he wrote a song called What Goes Around Comes Around? When you think of the lyrics, what goes around comes around, what planet do you think of? If you guys were in my classroom right now, I would say everyone would go Saturn, right? What goes around comes around, Saturn, the planet of karma. Now, Saturn, because it has a very long cycle, it only repeats in a sign every 29 years or so. So when was the last time that Saturn was in these later degrees of Aquarius? When was the last time? The last time was in 1993 when Britney Spears met Justin in the Mickey Mouse Club. What goes around comes around. Amazing. Amazing. The last time that happened was in 1993 when she met Justin. Now it is here again. And except it's a what goes around comes around type of a situation with Saturn. Okay. So we've got that going on. And then, so that's the solar return chart that was completely blowing my mind. Now, the next thing that I want to show you guys is, okay, I want to show you guys, I'm going to show you guys some zodiacal releasing, which is a Time Lord technique. And I'm also going to show you guys yearly profections, which is a Time Lord technique too. And so perfections is saying, you know, what house is basically what planet is the Time Lord for the year, and what house is being emphasized in this particular year. And so if we go and we take a look at for 2023, Justin Timberlake for 2023 is in a Saturn Time Lord year with the Aquarius, with this sign Aquarius being highlighted. So if we go back to his natal chart and take a look at what house is ruled by Aquarius, it's the seventh house. Okay. So because Aquarius rules the seventh house and he's in an Aquarius perfection year, he's in a seventh house perfection year, which the seventh house, of course, has to do with our relationships. So again, another thing showing how important his relationships are this year. Past relationships, current relationships. I'm sure that all of these revelations are also putting pressure on his current relationship as well. Now, next, I wanted to and just that Pluto, before I move on from this Pluto, this South Node Pluto situation where we had that eclipse there squaring the Venus, talking about, a very purging of an old love story, because the South Node and Pluto are both purging type of planets. And then they're squaring that Venus. So this is a very purging of a past love story. Now, whether he uses this as an opportunity to come clean and be, whether he takes this as an opportunity for rebirth or transformation, or if he just goes and kind of buries his head in the sand and kind of hides, it's a painful situation, no doubt about it. And it's coming up again for a reason, as we can see. And I just want to talk a little bit too about his zodiacal releasing as well. So zodiacal, I'm just showing you guys basically every technique is showing partnerships, love story, Pluto, Venus, it's just over and over and over flashing on this old story. Now, the other thing I'm going to talk to you guys about, like I said, is zodiacal releasing. And zodiacal releasing is another Time Lord technique. It's more complex. There's a little more involved in it, but I kind of want to show you his career and what's happening with that, because I did call this kind of, the destruction of his career. Now, when we're doing zodiacal releasing, just a couple notes here. So we always look for the part of fortune, which is right here at 13 degrees Libra. So the peak periods for him, because it's in Libra, his high periods or his peak periods are going to be when he hits Cancer periods, Aries periods, Capricorn periods, and Libra periods. And one thing we need to really make sure that we're looking at is, if there's any benefics or malefics in these peak period signs, because that may show some difficulty. He has Jupiter and Saturn here in the third house. So we know that when he goes through a Libra period, there's going to be some good and some bad, but the good is going to outweigh the bad, because Jupiter is the insect benefic, which is basically beating out this Saturn, which is the insect malefic. Okay. So we've got that going on there. So anytime we see a Libra period, there could be some good, some bad. Just kind of remember that. And then the worst malefic in this chart, because it's a day chart, is going to be Mars. And so anytime he's in an Aquarius period in zodiacal releasing, or he's moving into a fixed sign period, which would be Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and particularly Aquarius, it's going to be a tough time for him. It's going to be a tougher time. So let's just keep that in mind as we move on over to the zodiacal releasing. Okay. So I'm just going to show you guys here. Not there. Sorry about that. I want to go over here and move over to the zodiacal releasing. And first take note, we want to release from the lot of spirit, which has to do with his career. Okay. And Justin Timberlake started out in a peak period. Okay. And not everybody does that. Another really famous young musician that started off in a peak Cancer period is Justin Bieber. So Justin Timberlake actually starts off his life in a peak period for his career. And so we see, from the time from 0 years old to 24 years old, he's going to be in a peak career period, a very powerful peak career period. And he did most of his work. He'd already won his first Grammy by 2004. He'd done a lot of his work then, okay, for his career. And and he was internationally famous and won his first Grammy by 2004 already. So we can see that very high peak period that hit from 1981 to 2005 for him, just in general, was a very epic period for him. Okay. And so these are some peak periods from when he was younger. But one thing that we will note is in this peak period here, so he has a peak period starting in November 19th of 1994. And then right before that would be the buildup into that 1994 period. That's when from 1993 to 1994, that's when he was on the Mickey Mouse show and when he got discovered. And when he first met Britney Spears, actually, was then. So we see that peak period happening there too. Now, in 1998, not only do we see this is a very special year for him because it also is a loosing of the bond, but it also is a peak period. And, that little asterisk right there means that it's a loosening of the bond. And loosening of a bond only happens sometimes once in a lifetime, twice, or up to the most 3 times. And so 1998 for his career, a very special year indeed. And from that time period to 1998 to 2000 is when he became really, really famous. In fact, from 1998 to 2000 is when NSYNC, NSYNC basically came out with their first album, No Strings Attached, in March of 2000, before this peak period ended. And so, this was a hugely transformative period from him. This was also the time when he started dating Britney Spears during this time frame in 1999. This is when they had their huge, NSYNC time from this period. And then after that period ended is when NSYNC kind of like started to disband. And then by January 31st of 2004, starting in February of 2004, he had already received his first Grammy for Cry Me a River. So that is another important peak period. 2004, he won his first Grammy for Cry Me a River. So we see these peak periods happening for him as they go. And after he, won the Grammy for Cry Me a River, then he moves out of that phase for his career and moves into a new phase where he did like Suit and Tie, and he did Future Lovesexx, or whatever the title of that album was, that were, successful as well. He has some other peak periods after that big, cancer period that lasted for 24 years when he became internationally famous and well known. Then he goes into this where he's got some other things going on, but for all intents and purposes, his biggest hit is really in this, time from 1998 to 2005. And, what's interesting, because I am talking about the destruction of his career and some career changes that he's been going through. So he went through those very high peak periods. And right now he's in a Leo period. And remember how I said the fixed signs are always going to be harder for him because he has Mars in Aquarius, which is the most malefic planet in his chart. So the fixed signs are always going to be more challenging. So he goes into a Leo period starting at age 24, and he's going to be in this Leo period until he's 43 years old, until June of 2024. Now, remember when I said earlier that the loosening of the bond may only happen once or twice in somebody's life. So he had a loosening of the bond. He met Britney Spears. He started dating her. He became really famous. NSYNC dropped their album, No Strings Attached. That was a big period for him. But look at this, you guys, because starting January 21st of 2023, he enters into a loosing of the bond again for the second time in his lifetime. And at this time, in January of 2023, NSYNC comes together again for the first time in 20 plus years to issue or to put out a song together. And of course, in 2023, there's been rumors, are they getting back together? Are they doing stuff? What's happening? And then they came out with that song, Better Place, for the movie Trolls. So again, now we're hitting this loosening of the bond, and NSYNC is doing music together again after the old loosening of the bond when they quit and disbanded. So we're kind of seeing that happen. And we're also seeing that same time frame that interacts with the Britney Spears stuff as well, because this book also came out during this loosening of the bond period, which may, spell some trouble for his career, or may signify that a major, and loosening of the bond doesn't always mean, sometimes it means you're getting ready to hit a massive, amazing thing. But in this case, I want to show you guys when the loosening of the bond hit in 1998, it was in a Capricorn period. And his chart, Capricorn, Venus, a benefic, is in Capricorn. And so that's going to feel easier. But now in 2023, when he's hitting this loosening of the bond, it's hitting in Leo, or it's hitting in Aquarius, actually, which is where it contains his biggest malefic in his chart. Okay. So that loosening of the bond that's happening now in 2023 is happening in Aquarius. And so it's not favorable like the time in 1998. Yeah, NSYNC got back together and did a song together for the first time ever since they disbanded. But at the same time, there is significant challenges here now for Justin Timberlake, because what has been revealed in this book and, what is basically happening to his reputation. And as we said, what goes around comes around. And so those are the things that I have to share with you guys today. I hope that you enjoyed that. I tried to keep it streamlined and not pummel you guys with tons of extra information. But I do think that I showed you on multiple levels where the astrology is hitting exactly. And I talked about the eclipse from this year, the eclipse from 2004 when Crimea River came out. I talked about his solar return chart ascendant being exactly on top of that Pluto. I showed you the transits happening. I told you he was in a 7th house perfection year for partnership, where partnerships are going to be a focus. And I also showed you his loosening of the bond that's happening in Aquarius, that is tied to his lot of spirit, which represents his career. And, is it the end of his career or not? Like, him and NSYNC just got back together and they did the song for the first time. But what else is going to happen to his career? And we don't know the full story yet, but we do know that when a loosening of the bond occurs, it is a major transformation. And again, we only have in our entire lifetime, some people only have 1 or 2, or at the most 3. And so, 2 major periods for him, 1998 and 2023. So there is some massive movement going on for him right now, and what the future holds for him as far as his career goes. So thank you so much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the webcast. And if you're interested in looking at my natal chart interpretation for Britney Spears, I will drop the link to that video below in the description box. And if you're interested in getting a natal chart reading with me and you like what I'm doing here, I'll also drop a link to my website, so you can go ahead and book a reading if you're interested in doing that. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate